If you've ever gotten hit with an IRS penalty for filing or paying a little late, even though you've done everything right for years, I want you to keep listening, because the IRS just made a real change that could put that penalty relief in your pocket, automatically, without you having to call, write a letter, or beg anyone for mercy. This matters most for retirees and seniors because so many of you are managing required minimum distributions, part-time income, or a tax situation that's just a little more complicated than a simple paycheck. And one late payment or one missed form can trigger a penalty even when you've been a responsible taxpayer your whole life. Today I'm going to walk you through exactly what the IRS confirmed, who actually qualifies, who doesn't, and the one thing you should check on your own account starting today. The IRS has officially announced a new program called the Automatic Exemption from Penalty, or AEP for short. This is a real confirmed change from the IRS, not a rumour and not a proposal still working its way through Congress. The IRS's own chief executive, Frank Bisignano, said the idea behind this program is simple. Taxpayers who have historically paid on time shouldn't have to file a formal request for relief that the IRS was likely going to grant anyway. That's a meaningful shift, and it's worth understanding exactly how it works so you know if it applies to you. This program's not about giving you a reward simply because you filed on time this year. If you file and pay on time, you were never going to owe a penalty in the first place, so there's nothing to waive. What AEP actually does is protect people who have a strong track record of filing and paying on time for the past 3 years, but who slip up in the current year. Maybe they file a few weeks late, or a payment doesn't go through when it should. In the past, if that happened to you, the penalty would show up automatically, and it was on you to know that you could call the IRS and request something called first-time abate to get it removed. Most people never called, which meant the penalty just sat there, and many folks paid it without ever knowing they didn't have to. Now the IRS is flipping that process. Instead of penalising you first and making you ask for relief, the IRS will check your compliance history during processing, and if you qualify, the penalty is never assessed at all. You don't lift a finger. If you do qualify, the IRS will send you a letter confirming that even though your return or payment was late, no penalty was charged because of your history of timely compliance. Let me walk you through exactly who qualifies, because this is where a lot of people get confused. To be eligible, you need a track record of filing your returns on time and paying any tax due for the 3 prior years. That's the core requirement. This program applies to individual returns, which for most retirees means your standard Form 1040, as well as several business and payroll-related forms for anyone still running a small business or doing consulting work in retirement. The IRS has specifically listed forms like the 1040, 1065, 1120, and several employment tax forms as eligible under this new process. If you qualify, the IRS will not assess 3 common penalties during processing: the failure to file penalty, the failure to pay penalty, and the failure to deposit penalty for those who make estimated payments. To put that in real dollars, the failure to file penalty is typically 5% of your unpaid tax. For each month your return is late, up to a maximum of 25%. The failure to pay penalty is smaller month to month, around 0.5%, but it also adds up the longer you wait. For someone living on a fixed income, even a few $100s in unnecessary penalties can be the difference between a comfortable month and a stressful one, which is exactly why this change matters so much for this audience. I do want to be clear about what this program does not do, because I never want to overstate a government announcement. This is not a program that erases the tax you actually owe. If you owe money to the IRS, you still owe that money, and interest will still accrue on any unpaid balance. AEP only affects certain penalties, not the underlying tax debt and not interest charges. So if you're thinking this is some kind of blanket forgiveness program, it isn't, and anyone telling you otherwise online is stretching the truth. This is targeted, specific relief for people who have a clean history and had one imperfect year. Let's talk about who does not qualify, because this is just as important. If this is your first time filing, or if you don't yet have 3 years of on-time filing and paying behind you, you won't qualify under this new automatic system, though you may still be able to request the older first-time abate relief while the transition is happening. If you've had a pattern of late filing or late payments in the past 3 years, this program isn't designed for you, because the entire point is rewarding a consistent history of compliance. And certain returns are excluded altogether, including things like state tax returns and gift tax returns, since those tend to be one-time filings tied to a specific life event rather than a recurring pattern the IRS can track. Picture a retired schoolteacher named Carol. She's filed her taxes on time every single year for the past decade. One year, she's dealing with a health issue. Her paperwork gets delayed, and her return goes in 3 weeks late. Under the old system, she'd get hit with a failure to file penalty automatically. And unless she knew to call the IRS and specifically request first-time abate, she'd likely just pay it, assuming that's simply what she owed. Under this new automatic system, because Carol has 3 clean years behind her, the IRS is supposed to recognise that pattern during processing and simply not charge her the penalty in the first place. She'd get a letter explaining that even though her return was late, no penalty was applied because of her compliance history. That's the entire spirit of this change, rewarding people like Carol instead of punishing a single bad month in an otherwise responsible life. One of the biggest misunderstandings I want to clear up involves timing, because the rollout isn't instant. This program is expected to begin this summer, and it applies specifically to tax year 2025 returns and 2026 quarterly filings going forward. During the transition period this year, some people who would otherwise qualify might still receive an old-style penalty notice simply because the systems are still catching up. If that happens to you, don't panic and don't just pay it out of frustration. You can still contact the IRS directly and request the removal of that penalty under the existing first-time abate rules, while this new automatic process fully rolls out. The IRS has said this new system is expected to be the primary method covering all eligible returns, with due dates on or after January 1st, 2027. So think of this year as a transition period where both the old and new processes exist side by side. Before I go any further, if you're finding this helpful, take a second to hit like and subscribe. I put out videos like this regularly to help you cut through confusing government announcements and understand exactly what applies to your real life, without the scare tactics you see elsewhere. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need clear, honest information, so I appreciate you taking that moment. Many retirees assume that because they've never called the IRS before, they're not the kind of person who requests anything from them, so they just quietly pay whatever penalty shows up on a notice. I want to gently push back on that instinct. The IRS itself, through its independent taxpayer advocate service, has acknowledged that roughly 1 million taxpayers every year, many of them lower income, actually qualify for penalty relief but never receive it simply because they don't know to ask. That's the entire reason this automatic system was created in the first place. And so, if you've paid a penalty in the past few years and you had a clean filing history before that, it's worth checking your IRS account or a recent notice to see if that penalty could have been waived or whether you're now positioned to avoid it going forward. Here's a practical tip that applies to everyone listening, regardless of whether you currently owe anything. You can create or log into your online account directly on the official IRS website to view your filing and payment history, see any notices you've received, and check your current balance if you have one. This is also the safest way to confirm anything about your own tax situation, rather than relying on a phone call from someone claiming to be the IRS, since the IRS does not initiate contact by phone demanding immediate payment. If you ever get a call like that, that's a scam, full stop, and it has nothing to do with this legitimate program we're discussing today. Another practical step, especially if you're managing required minimum distributions or you make quarterly estimated payments as a retiree with investment or self-employment income, is to simply keep doing what you're already doing well. This program rewards consistency, so continuing to file and pay on time is what builds and protects your eligibility for automatic relief if you ever do have an off year. If you're not sure whether a distribution or payment you made was processed correctly, that's worth verifying directly through your IRS online account or with a licensed tax professional, especially if your income situation changed recently due to Social Security, Medicare premiums, or pension adjustments. The IRS has confirmed a real, new automatic system called AEP that will waive certain penalties, specifically failure to file, failure to pay, and failure to deposit for taxpayers with a 3-year history of on-time filing and paying without requiring you to request it. This is not a waiver of taxes owed, and it's not available to everyone, but if you've been a consistent, responsible filer, this change is built specifically with people like you in mind. The most important thing to remember is that this relief is meant to be automatic, but the rollout is happening gradually this year, so if you receive a penalty notice during this transition and believe your history should have protected you. Don't just pay it quietly. The one action I'd encourage you to take today is simple. Log into your official IRS online account. Take a look at your recent filing history and any notices you've received. And if something doesn't look right, reach out to the IRS directly or speak with a trusted tax professional to make sure you're getting the relief you're entitled to. I know dealing with the IRS can feel intimidating, especially when you're trying to protect a retirement you worked your whole life for. But understand this, changes like this one exist because policymakers recognise that honest, consistent taxpayers deserve a system that treats them fairly. You've done your part by staying on top of your taxes year after year, and now the system is starting to meet you halfway. Stay informed, stay proactive, and know that you're not alone in figuring this out. I'll keep bringing you clear, honest updates like this one, so take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.